Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. October, week 2 is here. A new newsletter just went out last night, so it's full of everything we've got coming up this month, including a whole bunch of space exploration events. So do check that out, exploringbytheseat.com. Register to hang out with us in camera spots or to tune in via YouTube live or later. We'd, of course, love to see your classrooms and take you on a little adventure off of our planet. Well, today we are going to spend a little time in the field, which, of course, I think everybody knows is one of our favorite things to do here. Anytime we can take students out into the world is always pretty darn fun. So we're going to spend some time with you around the Americas expedition. It seems like just last week we were hanging out with them. We were learning a little bit about climate change and rising sea levels and what that all means. If you don't know already, Around the Americas is a 14-month expedition. It launched in May. They will circumnavigate North and South America aboard the 48-foot sailboat One Ocean. So the mission is focusing on scientific research, education, community outreach to raise awareness about our ocean health, and also exploring some of our kelp ecosystems, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today. They are among the Earth's most dynamic and productive marine ecosystems, giant kelp, bull kelp. They are huge spots where you can find biodiversity around our planet. And let's dive into that a little bit today. So let me reach backstage and bring in our crew from the ocean. Hey, team, how are we doing today?
Hi, Joe. We're doing good. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, it's great to see you. Last week when we connected, you had a little rocky weather going. It sounds like that might be carrying over.
It's still a little bumpy out here. Turns out the ocean is never static.
We are off of Nova Scotia, Canada, and we've been just sort of having to weave between storm after storm out here, actually.
All right. Well, I know if there's one team that's up for it, it is your team. You've already made such amazing progress from our first connection back in Washington. Then again up off the coast of Alaska. Then you took a little trip through the Northwest Passage, which is pretty cool. And now, you're on the other side of Canada. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we've almost completed a circumnavigation of Canada, actually.
Very, very cool. Well, it's just one big coastline on the one large island of North and South America that you're making your way around. I'm going to share my screen here as well, because I know we've got a little presentation tucked back here as well. But that's enough for me. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit.
Awesome.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes. So if you want to pull up Grace here, I think the next slide is where our introduction is.
So why don't we talk about
Yeah, so you just did a great introduction, but we are the One Ocean team. We're sailing on board sailing vessel One Ocean around North and South America for ocean research, education, and community outreach. My name is Tess. I'm the outreach coordinator.
And I'm Michael Beamer, the onboard engineer and research assistant, along with everybody else. That's what we do. We all have multiple jobs.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Dalton, and I'm the project director, and we have Captain Mark Schrader. He's actually being the captain at the moment and watching. He's on watch with the boat. And then we have our lead scientist. Take it away, Grace Dalton.
Hi, so I'm Grace Dalton. So if you go to the next slide there, Joe, it's just introductions of all the crew members that we just listed there. Great crew going around the Americas. But now we'll dive into kelp. So what is kelp? So kelp looks like an underwater plant, but it's actually a giant brown algae, a kind of seaweed. It doesn't have roots or flowers like land plants. Instead, it absorbs nutrients directly from the seawater. Kelp can grow as tall as a 10-story building. These towering underwater forests are home to thousands of ocean species, and they grow incredibly fast and are some of the fastest growing ecosystems on Earth. There are 16 species of kelp, but during our expedition, we're only going to study 2 species, bull and giant kelp. So the next slide there will show you the anatomy of kelp. So here's what kelp looks like close up. We've got 2 different examples, bull and giant here. So at the bottom of a kelp is the holdfast. It's like a claw that grips onto the rock so that the kelp doesn't drift away. And then there's the stipe. It's a flexible stem-like part that bends and sways with the waves. Then there are the blades that act like leaves. They collect sunlight for photosynthesis, turning sunlight into energy so they can grow. And then at the top, there are those little round balloon balls. They're called floats or bladders, and they're filled mostly with carbon monoxide gas, and they act like tiny balloons that lift the blades towards the sunlight. So those are the main parts of a kelp in kelp forests. So in the next slide here, we're going to talk about bull kelp versus giant kelp. And so for our expedition, we are going to study these two species, bull and giant kelp. So bull kelp has one big round float at the top with many blades attached to it. It looks like a long balloon with lots of mermaid hair almost growing after it. And it grows in cold, wave-exposed, shallow water and usually lives only 1 year. Whereas giant kelp, on the other hand, has many smaller floats, one per blade, and it looks like a bunch of grapes. It can live up to many years and grows in deep, calmer water. It can even grow up to 2 feet a day, which is pretty crazy growth rate. Bull kelp prefers northern Pacific coast, while giant kelp thrives farther south, even into South America. And you can see on the right, we've got different images. The top image is giant kelp, the grape-like kelp, and then the bottom left is the bull kelp with the long flowing hair. So now for our next slide, we'll talk about why kelp forests are so important. So kelp forests are more than just pretty underwater scenery. They're vital to our planet. They're home to an enormous amount and variety of ocean life, including fish, crabs, snails, and even sea otters. They also absorb carbon dioxide, helping slow down climate change. Kelp forests also protect our coastlines by softening waves and reducing erosion, and many important fisheries depend on them, so without kelp forests, we'd lose countless of species we rely on. In our next slide here, we can see how kelp forests are home to many different species. They're like underwater cities. Baby fish and crabs grow up safely in their shelter. It's like an ocean nursery. Sea otters can wrap themselves in kelp and stay anchored while they sleep. And seals and sea lions are here, hunt food here as well. The forest is full of life day and night, and you can see a bunch of different examples of the species in the corner there. We've got some fish below, we've got sea otters, and if you look closely in that lower right corner, you can see a seal swimming through the kelp forest, which is pretty cool. And actually, our next slide, we have a video which is going to show you a seal swimming through the kelp forest if you can spot it. So collected this on an expedition, and then there it is, swimming through the kelp forest. So this is some video imagery we collected, which is pretty exciting, pretty cool thing. And then the next slide will also show some pretty cool fish swimming by in the kelp forest. Beautiful. So this is just a great example of all the vast different species you can find in these ecosystems. It's truly full of life, and it's a very, very important and vital habitat for the ocean. So kelp forests are also a huge part of the food web. Everything is connected, from tiny plankton drifting in the water to large predators like sea lions. Plankton feeds small animals like snails and fish, which become food for bigger creatures. Sea urchins eat the kelp itself, and sea otters and sea stars help keep those urchins under control. Every layer of life depends on the other. If one part disappears, the whole forest can change. It's a perfect example of how balance keeps an ecosystem healthy. Here's a list of residents you can find in a kelp forest. Colorful sea slugs called nudibranches, which you can see in the upper left corner. Sea stars, which is in the lower left. Abalone, sea urchins, and even the incredible giant Pacific octopus. If you're lucky, you can spot that every once in a while. Every creature depends on kelp in some different way. So now we're going to dive into a bit of our research that we're doing on board for the kelp study. So for our expedition, we're doing a North Pole to South Pole kelp study. So that's the whole entire North and South America, the whole entire West Coast. So our kelp research covers nearly the entire West Coast of the Americas, from Alaska all the way down to Patagonia, as you can see in that map. We study both bull and giant kelp to understand where they grow, how healthy they are, and what conditions help or harm them. The answers help us protect not just the kelp, but also the animals that call these forests home. And in our next slide, you can see we'll dive into how we do the research. So for part of our research is that we study kelp forests from beneath the water to get a view of the forest from below, which is pretty cool. We get to go under the water and see some fantastic imagery. So one of our main tools is something called a quadrat. It's basically a pyramid picture frame we drop underwater to take photos and videos of the seafloor. You can see the quadrat in the lower two photos. You can see an example of it while it's deployed under the water, and also another example of it to the right on our dinghy. We also use GPS and depth sensors to record exactly where we are, and we take careful notes of the data. These images show us what's living around the kelp and how healthy the forest floor is beneath the water. So the next slide here is a short video of the imagery the quadrat collects when dropped beneath the kelp forest.
Just before we go to that video, I noticed that the crew is holding up one of the cameras there. Let's show off the cameras that you're using.
This is the top of that quadrat that Grace is talking about, and it has cameras that are waterproof housings that can look both horizontally, and Grace will talk about this, and straight down. And so we drop this at all of these sites multiple times. And so that's part of us as research assistants. We can help with Grace collecting this imagery that you've been seeing. And I love seeing how beautiful the kelp forest is.
All right. Wow. We see the cameras. Let's take a look at some of the footage they've been collecting. I believe our next slide will do that for us. Let me get that nice in front and center. There we go.
Yes, so this is us dropping a quadrat in one of our kelp forests. If you look closely, you might be able to spot a seal. I believe, yeah, there we go. They will come and swim. There it is. And then here comes a second seal that will come and say hi to the cameras. Beautiful. So this is a bull kelp forest, and we obviously get some fun little species that will come and say hi to our cameras when we drop the quadrat down beneath the forest. So it's a pretty cool experience to be able to do. So for our next slide, we're going to go more into the quadrat and how it takes the imagery. So Mike did a great example. We've got two cameras on the quadrat, one facing horizontal across and then one facing down. And so the one looking downward to the ground is so we can see how much kelp is growing on the rocks, and then the one looking across is to see how tall and dense the forest is and what species are there. So there's some great examples of the imagery we've captured from these two different cameras. In the bottom left, you can see the downwards view, and you can see some different species there, like starfish and a different species of kelp. And then on the right, you can see the horizontal view. So now we're going to dive into how we study kelp from above. So another part of our research is studying kelp forests from above. We use two tools for this, a drone and satellite imagery. If you pull up the Around the Americas crew, they're holding our special high-tech drone, which we use for every kelp bed. Yeah, so that's our DJI Maverick 3 drone that we fly at every single kelp bed. We fly these drones in a grid pattern over the kelp beds. The drone takes regular pictures, but also special infrared images that show hidden detail that we may miss with only regular photos. By comparing new drone photos with older satellite images, we can see if the kelp beds are growing or shrinking. So it's giving us a broader perspective of past years to present. And it also helps us zoom out so we can see the whole forest from above, which is very important. We also have some other science tools that we use for the kelp forest studying, because it's important to understand the ocean's conditions to protect the kelp, and we need to know the environment it lives in. So we use a CTD sensor that measures connectivity, temperature, and depth, and you can see the crew is holding that up right now. The silver bit is the sensor, and then the blue bit is the logger that stores the data when we drop it into the water. So we'll drop it really deep down into the water.
And we tied this part off here, so we're holding on to it the whole time, but it drops down and then slowly back up. Right, Grace?
Yes.
I learned that.
So the CTD sensor collects conductivity, which tells us how salty the water is. And this is what scientists call salinity. It also collects temperature, which affects how fast kelp grows and how much oxygen the water can hold. And it also collects the depth the CTD is dropping at. So that helps us see how light and pressure change in different parts of the kelp forests. And together those numbers show us if the water is healthy for kelp or if something's changing, like during a heat wave. Another tool we use is a Secchi disc. That is a black and white circle, and it measures water clarity. You can see the crew is holding it up right now. So we will lower that black and white plate deep into the water, and then that gives us the measure. Once we lose sight of the black and white plate in the water, that gives us the measure of the clarity or turbidity of the water, which is very important for understanding kelp health and growth. So cloudy water often means there's more pollution, plankton blooms, or sediment blocking sunlight. And that's important because kelp needs sunlight to photosynthesize. So the turbidity of the water can definitely impact kelp health and growth. We also use a tool called the GoPro pole. It lets us take close-up underwater selfies of the kelp. Those photos help us check blade color, growth, and whether anything like algae, bryozoans, or urchins are living on the kelp or under the kelp. I don't know if the crew were able to pull up the GoPro stick, but
We have a simulated one. How about that?
Yeah, we have we have one of these that's just about 12 feet long instead of 3 or 4 feet long. Same underwater housing, though, for the GoPro.
Wonderful. So that's exactly what the GoPro stick looks like, just a bit longer so we can get it under the kelp forest and get those amazing photos. So by combining all of these tools, we can understand the full picture of the kelp forest. The light, the temperature, the water quality, and the living community. That helps us predict how forests will respond to future changes and how to protect them. So now we'll go into what are we measuring with this research. So first, we're studying where kelp grows. Things like how deep is the water, how strong is the waves where kelp are growing, and what kind of sea floor the kelp is attached to. Some kelp prefer rocky bottoms where its holdfast can grip tightly onto rocks, while others might be in sandy or muddy areas where kelp can't grow as well. We also measure the density of the forest, how much kelp is packed into a certain area, kind of like counting trees in a forest on land. And this helps us see whether a forest is thick and healthy or thinning out. And you can see how the images, you can see the bottom left are drone images that we've taken above a kelp forest. So you can see the full color in the infrared. And then on the top side of the page, you can see the satellite imagery we use, and then also matching that with the Google Earth. And that shows us where the forests are and how big and healthy they are. Now we'll go to the next slide, where we're going to be talking about more things that we're measuring with this data. So we will talk about the health of the kelp forest. We check to see if the kelp blades are green, flexible, or damaged, and pale. If there are any white specks on the blade, that are tiny filter-feeding animals called bryozoans. Bryozoans attach themselves to kelp and can block sunlight, slowing photosynthesis and growth. We're also looking at what's living nearby or underneath the kelp forest. So what type of neighbors or species are in the forest? For example, sea urchins graze on kelp blades, while sea otters and sea stars help control urchin populations. This balance is important because too many urchins can wipe out an entire forest, but healthy predator numbers keep everything stable. We're also measuring how clear, warm, and nutrient-rich the water is. Kelp needs sunlight and nutrients, but not too much warmth. When the ocean gets too hot or too murky, kelp struggles to survive. By combining all of this data, the health, the distribution, the density of the kelp, its neighbors, and the surrounding water, we can understand not just how the kelp forest looks, but how it's functioning and changing over time. So why is that important to understand all of this measurement and this data that we're doing? So in the next slide, we'll dive into why is this important? Why is the research important? So the information we collect helps us detect early change before problems become too big to fix. By comparing our data over time, we can see when kelp forests begin to weaken, maybe from warming ocean temperatures, pollution, or too many sea urchins eating away at the kelp. These patterns help us track the effects of climate change, ocean acidification, and coastal development on marine life. When we notice declines, we can alert local communities and scientists so they can take action sooner. Our research also helps us guide conservation efforts, such as creating or improving marine protected area where kelp and wildlife are safe from overfishing or damage. It even supports restoration projects where divers and scientists replant kelp in damaged areas and monitor how well it regrows. And perhaps most importantly, by sharing our results with classrooms just like you and communities and other scientists, hopefully we help inspire people to care for the ocean and make informed choices to protect the ecosystems for the future. So now we're going to talk about some serious threats facing kelp forests that occur every day. So understanding these threats helps us protect these forests before it's too late. So some threats are rising ocean temperatures and marine heat waves. When the water gets too warm, kelp becomes stressed. It grows more slowly, its blades weaken, and sometimes it can't reproduce. Warm water also holds less oxygen and fewer nutrients, which makes it hard for the kelp to survive. Another very serious threat is when natural predators like sea otters disappear and sea urchins multiply out of control. These swarms are called sea urchin armies, and you can see that in the lower left, the whole entire seafloor is just covered in sea urchins. And this is a threat because if they grow out of control, they can clear entire forests down to the bare rock. They'll just eat away at the base of the kelp and just kill everything off. Without kelp, the fish will lose their homes and the whole food web can collapse. Pollution is another serious threat to kelp. From trash, chemicals, and runoff, it all clouds the water and blocks sunlight, which kelp needs for photosynthesis, which leads to growth. Another threat is powerful storms and diseases, which can physically tear apart kelp beds or infect blades, causing large areas to die. And finally, invasive species are another threat to kelp forests. Invasive species are plants or animals that don't naturally belong in the area. And the reason why they're a threat is because they can crowd out native kelp, which can steal nutrients away from them or change the balance of the ecosystem. Over time, that can transform an entire forest into a very different and less productive habitat. So these are all very serious threats kelp face daily, and they're very important to understand because it makes us realize that they are facing these threats and that we do need to do something about it. So the good news is what can we do to help? And we can help. Every day, you can reduce your waste by reusing bottles, skipping single-use plastics, and keeping chemicals out of gardens and drains. You can also support marine protected areas and choose sustainable seafood. And for some young scientists out there like you guys, there are projects like Kelp Watch, Reef Check, and iNaturalists that let people everywhere report what they see and monitor ocean health. And the more people that are involved, the more effective and passionate everyone becomes, and the better science occurs. And now for our last slide, if you would also like to learn more, you can check out Sailors for the Sea and their Kelp program. They have a great Kelp program, especially for young age kids. And it's a very fun environmental lesson that teaches kids how to protect ocean habitats like kelp forests, no matter where you live. And that is everything. So if anyone has any questions, or if our crew would like to come on and say any final words, but thank you so much for joining me for diving into the kelp forests.
Thank you, Grace. That was fantastic.
Yes, Grace. It makes me miss the last bits of time when we were gathering all of those pictures.
Yeah,
Kelp forest, so beautiful.
it was so beautiful and so much work, but just absolutely stunning and wonderful to do that research with you.
Yes, we are putting a pause on our research right now. The boat is currently on the east coast of North America, up in Canada. And right now, bull and giant kelp don't live or don't grow where they are at. So we're putting a quick pause on our research, but we will start back up.
Not all our research, just the kelp.
Just
we
the kelp.
still have a lot of other research going on here.
Yeah, we'll be back to kelp in like 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wonderful.
All right, good stuff. Well, I personally enjoy exploring kelp and diving in kelp forests. I've been lucky enough to do it in a few different spots, and it's always fun to see who's around, especially those playful seals, tons of invertebrates, and sharks. When I was in South Africa recently, there was all kinds of little cat sharks and pajama sharks and cool sharks and octopus hanging around. So definitely a biodiverse, species-rich place.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, let's get into some Q&A action. If you are tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy. Use the chat sidebar to send us in some questions for the team. It could be about kelp. It could be about other research. It could be about what life is like on board the sailboat, sailing through the Northwest Passage, and those fun adventures. We have Miss Barha's crew hanging out backstage. They're in California, so I'm going to let them get started. Maybe they have a couple questions to get us started. Hey, Miss Barha's crew, how are we doing?
Good. I got a question. Can seahorses eat seaweed?
So can seahorses eat like kelp and seaweed?
Oh, seahorses, can they eat kelp and seaweed? That is a great question. The kelp forests we study, we haven't seen any seahorses yet, but they don't quite eat seaweed or kelp. They eat different things such as copepods, larval fish, and other things like that. So not exactly seaweed and kelp. Thank you, though.
They prefer little critters swimming in the water, snapping them up. They're pretty fast.
Great question.
Awesome. Good question. Do you guys have another one handy there before we check YouTube?
Anna. Yeah.
Yeah? All right. We're ready. How's it going?
How does kelp grow?
Oh, that's a great question. So it definitely depends on the species. So, for example, bull kelp will release a tiny spore that settles on rock and hard surfaces underwater. And then it anchors itself using a structure called a holdfast, like a root. And then from there, it will grow upward using a stipe. And then it will grow blades, which can grow photosynthesis, and that allows it to grow from there. So kind of like a plant, but it's a seaweed that's underwater. So it's kind of like a plant in terms of it has a little tiny spore that goes onto the ground and then grows from there.
But it does use sunshine, right, Grace?
Yes, it uses sunshine and photosynthesis to grow. So it needs CO2 and sunshine and energy to grow.
And Grace, in the summer, when the conditions are really good, how fast can kelp grow?
Giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet a day. So that's 60 centimeters. So in perfectly ideal conditions, they can grow up to 2 feet a day. So they are very, very fast growing ecosystems, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Could you imagine if your grass on your front lawn grew 2 feet a day? That wouldn't be good.
Or
No.
when.
All right. Very cool. Great
Thank
question.
you.
All right, Miss Barha's crew, we're going to come back and check on you in a little bit. So if you have another question or two, we'll come and see what's going. I'm going to zip over to YouTube. We'll grab some questions from there. And the first one is about, you showed us the tools. Do you get in the water too to explore the kelp forest?
So we have a few times. We mainly rely on the tools, especially just because of weather and different circumstances. It's a bit easier and safer, but we have a few times gone in. It's really good to get some good imagery, dive beneath. We can take some cool photos. And sometimes it's also good to retrieve tools that we might have dropped overboard. But yeah, we will get in the water sometimes, but it's not all the time.
All right. I have a question here about flying the drones. Is it easy, and do you ever lose control?
That's a great question. I definitely would not say it's super easy. I personally had to do training. You have to get a license to be able to fly drones in Canada and in the States. So you have to do training on how to fly it and then also how to land it. That's usually our biggest, I don't want to say issue, but our biggest thing to figure out is the landing situation and the taking off. Once it's in the air, it's pretty good to go and fly over the kelp forest, but landing and taking off gets a little iffy. Sometimes we've had to have our crew members actually physically grab the drone and then have to grab it, and that's how we land it or take it off. So I don't know if the crew has it below, but maybe you guys can show them how we grab it.
With the drone, it's definitely a lot more risky when you're near water, because all the kelp is near water. And so, yeah, it's like Grace said, you can program it to take the pictures where they need to, but getting it out in our dinghy or to shore or off of the boat is definitely something you have to work on with skills.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm sure a lot of you kids have the skills because this is kind of a gamer console. So really, it's a lot of younger people, I think, feel more confident.
It'd be easier for you than us older.
Yeah.
Here's the drone.
Yeah.
A little sketchy to catch, but
While you have the drone there, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you replicate what a hand catch would look like with the drone?
oh
Yes,
gosh,
yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of hard without, but it pretty much just looks. You have one hand here.
Yeah,
okay, you have one hand, and normally I think it's.
Here, I'll hold it. So the drone is flying like this.
And then you go like
you
this.
Come down and grab it. You have to keep below and away from all the blades, obviously.
And you have to flip it upside down pretty fast, so that way the blades stop spinning. So yeah, it can be a little scary because the blades are going pretty fast, but practice.
And also protection. We do wear gloves.
Yeah,
we wear gloves now.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah, it's hard to have an accurate home point when you're on something that's moving.
Yeah.
Doesn't stay. Okay. One more question, and we'll check in with Miss Barha's crew again from YouTube. What about kelp and it being sustainable? Do you think it's going to be an important food source in the future?
Yes, that's a great question. So kelp is one of the most sustainable ecosystems on Earth, one managed properly. So kelp can grow very naturally. Kelp grows naturally and very quickly with no fertilizers or fresh water needed. And it grows very fast, like I said earlier, up to 2 feet, could be up to 2 feet a day. It also helps the environment with absorbing CO2, producing oxygen, and improving water quality. It also supports marine life. And so it's very sustainable for people too. There's a lot of companies out there currently that are trying to make it a food source. There's kelp farming, which is an aquaculture. It's growing worldwide and can be done without harming natural habitats. It's used for food, cosmetics, biofuel, bioplastics, and fertilizers. And farming kelp can provide also eco-friendly jobs. So I do know there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to make it a very sustainable food source. And you can find kelp in a bunch of different things. I believe there's a little bit of kelp in ice cream if you Google it. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, it's definitely a sustainable food source that people are trying to make a bigger thing.
All right. I'm going to grab one more here from YouTube that just came in. This is about the Northwest Passage and what was most challenging. What did you find most challenging during that stretch?
Yeah.
I think we could all just say one word: ice.
Yeah. Yeah. Ice for sure. Challenging to navigate through ice and not know if we're going to get stuck in a lead that we chose. But we've talked a lot about this. A good question on our website. You can listen to some podcasts we've done, and also we've been all writing different blogs. But all in all, I think overall, all of us say the same thing. Ice was very challenging, very exciting, very beautiful to look at as well. But it was a challenge, but we made it through.
Yeah, all right. Let's check in with Miss Barha's crew and see. Actually, first, before we ask a question, I want to know, has anybody there ever visited a kelp forest? Maybe you went snorkeling, maybe you saw it from shore, because I
Visited a kelp forest.
saw some kelp forest in Monterey and did some scuba diving, which was pretty cool. Hands up if you've ever visited a kelp forest, even just from the shore.
Even just from the shore.
Yeah, some hands.
Fine. Yeah, we're fine.
Cool. All right. Does anybody have another question or two for our team?
Has your boat ever started sinking?
Ooh, good question. Mike,
Yeah.
our engineer can talk about that.
Engineer Mike says no. We have not started sinking. We have bilge pumps and we have alarms. We have systems where if we get a little bit of water in the boat, it tells us so we can look at where it's coming from. But no, we have been very safe on this voyage, and touch wood, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you.
All right. I see Mark back. I see Captain Mark back there on the wheel. I think he's feeling left out.
Yeah.
In there, steering the ship.
He's up there steering the ship.
Say hi, Mark.
There he is. Someone has to be doing some work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to navigate into a little passage to get up to where we're going to stay tonight.
Okay. All right. Looks like we have another student up there for us.
What type of kelp is the worst at surviving?
Ooh, that's a great question. So there's 16 species of kelp, and not all kelp species are equally good at surviving changes in the ocean. Bull kelp is definitely one of the most vulnerable because it prefers cold, nutrient-rich waters along the Pacific coast. Golden kelp, which lives around Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, is also very vulnerable. It's very sensitive to rising sea temperatures, and if it even increases at all, it can stress it out quite a bit. And then giant kelp is also very sensitive too. Although it's one of the largest and fastest growing kelp, it still also depends on that cold, nutrient-rich water. So during heat waves or warming of waters, it can be very stressed out and vulnerable. That's a great question.
Thank you.
All right. Before I swing back to YouTube, do you have anything else?
Shaima, can I go?
Hi.
Can human eat kelp?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yes, humans can eat kelp. They like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different companies that are working to make it food. So yes, kelp is edible. It's a large brown seaweed that's completely safe to eat. When harvested from clean waters, that's the important thing. It's got to be in clean, safe waters. And it's also a superfood. It's packed with nutrients, so it's healthy to eat, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we tried pickled kelp, bullwhip with kelp.
It's definitely a little salty though from the ocean.
Yeah, it was a salty treat, but it was not bad actually. It was pretty good.
All right. Cool. Great question. Thanks, Ms. Barha's crew. You've had great questions today. Very cool. Okay, before we grab a couple more off YouTube, before we say goodbye for today, I want to share a picture. I made some friends in the kelp forest this summer in Scotland. So I want to share a quick picture here so you can see who I saw in the kelp forest. Let me pick the right one. There it is. He's cool.
Oh,
Yeah, this was a mother and her little cub. Well, the cub was pretty big by this stage, but they were out and they were hunting, and they were very efficient, going down, diving down into the kelp and coming up with little fish and other little snacks. It was really cool to get to watch them hunting along this beach.
Those are river otters. Is that correct, Joe?
They look very much like them, but these were definitely out in the ocean. These were sea otters. I know the otters that our friends in California are probably used to are a bit bigger and a bit puffier in California, but these were definitely ocean dwelling creatures. Yeah. All right. Okay, let's finish off with a couple more questions. So I think the first one that I have here is just what's next? What's next for the next few days, few weeks?
Well,
yeah, we're the next couple of days is waiting out another wind storm, and then we'll be headed south into the United States, and working our way down and provisioning.
getting food.
Well, actually, we're headed to Charleston, and we know one of the schools there has been following every one of our live classrooms with you, Joe. So we're going to connect with them, and hopefully it'd be wonderful if we can go visit them. So we'll see if we can make that work when we're down there. Everything is weather dependent, though. But yeah, so we have more live classrooms coming up and in-person connections as well.
All right, sounds good. I want to share one more thing with the classrooms. If you want to follow along, we didn't share the map today, so I'm going to put that up on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
You can go, to oneisland1ocean.com. You can find lots of stuff there, like the research and news stories, the blog. But this is pretty cool to play with. This map here, you can zoom in and zoom out. You can see the start of the journey. You can see the Northwest Passage. You can see where our team is right now. There we go. Let's zoom in a little bit. And then what's really neat is you can follow along and you can take a look at little pictures and little video clips from along the way. So that's pretty cool. There we go. Food. Students are always interested in food.
Yeah.
So, all kinds of cool things you can check out. So oneisland1ocean.com. Very cool.
Yeah. And I have to say, we love that tracker so much, and it's done by 060, and they've been wonderful, and they've worked with us along the way. And we have people telling us that they wake up in the morning and have their morning coffee and sit down and track where we are. So it's a great, great tracker. We love it.
Excellent. Well, if you visit exploringbytheseat.com under the events, you can also see the past events we've done with the crew, and you can see what we have coming up. So coming up, our next connection will be October 28th. It'll be at 12 p.m. Eastern again, and we're going to talk about whale identification and hydrophone. So that should be pretty cool.
This one's in a very exciting class. Grace can tell you a wee bit about it because she actually worked with this company, right, Grace, or this nonprofit group. Go ahead, Grace.
Yes, so the class will be talking with CEO, founder, and researcher Grace and Janie from BC Whales North Coast Cetacean Society. And they study a bunch of different whales, humpbacks, fins, and orcas, and they study them, understand them, and protect them. So it'll be a pretty fun classroom to speak with them.
And they listen to them.
Oh, yes, and they listen to them, which is very cool. Get to hear them singing.
That's great. All right. Well, I want to start off with a shout out to our classrooms. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks to our YouTube classrooms who sent us in some great questions as well. Miss Barha's crew, who was backstage with us in California. There they are. If they want to give a big wave.
Hi.
And then to the whole team, thank you so much for being with us today for another great adventure. We had back-to-back pretty much. Now there'll be a little bit of a stretch. So students are going to have to follow along on the website if you want to keep up with the adventures, and then join us to talk whales at the end of the month.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you very much, Joe. And again, thank you to everybody that's been joining our live classrooms. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off for today. There's still a whole week of events, so we hope to see your students joining us again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Bye. Thank you, Grace.